does bring into the thoughts, about how important connectivity is as well. We touched upon that a little bit earlier, I think, in one of the talks. But connectivity is just so important that we should try wherever possible to restore our hedgerow networks so there are not gaps, and so that animals and plants can move freely along the hedges and not be at risk of predators in the gaps in between.
So what would you do here in this gap here? If you were looking at this hedge, would you say you would replant here, or?
Well, if I assume there aren't any nice herbs growing there, and sometimes with Devon hedges they do have extremely good displays of spring flowers on them, and that's in part because they're not heavily shaded. But assuming that isn't the case here and there's nothing there you really want to keep, then yes, I would plant up that gap. Because the whole hedge, you can see it's been laid in the past, can't you, here? You see the laid stems. I mean, it's getting a bit moribund, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
top
it.
Which species to plant with?
How would I choose which species to plant with? Well,
given the exposure, given the width, for a lot of us, things will be the same thing. There's a reason these things have become gapped up, and now actually trying to get them unless you build a shelter belt to protect your shelter belt, then it's like, what are you planting it with? Because otherwise, I can imagine because people keep telling me we've got a grant to do it, but people, the older farmers are all saying, that will never work. You'll come back. As soon as it's gone through one winter, everything will be on it. Everything will be dead.
Yeah, well, I mean, to some extent, the fact that we have so many hedges here to begin with, and the wind hasn't got stronger in these days, shows that it can be done. And then in fact you can plant a wide variety of different species. So we got willow up there with the hawthorn. I'm sure we got blackthorn around, as well as sycamores, very good. Beech hedges, obviously brilliant. So you can establish a variety of different things.
These hedges obviously planted, weren't they?
Yes, they were all planted.
Yeah.
We got blackthorn there, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yes. The one thing I wouldn't plant so much of myself is actually the hawthorn or quickthorn, because it is quite a difficult species to manage. Because unlike blackthorn and holly, for example, it doesn't send up new shoots from the base. It's constantly trying to grow up and form a tree with a trunk. And as a result, you very quickly end up with a gappy hedge with mop-like or knuckle-like growth at the top. The wind whistles through underneath. So the standard planting mix you often see advocated, which is a high proportion of hawthorn in it, well, I would question whether that's right, and actually have a much lower proportion of hawthorn, only about 20 or 30%
Sure,
at the most.
That's a problem with,
Yes.
sycamore and willow and ash. They make terrible hedges, don't they? They shoot up in the spring and gap in the bottom. At least you can layer hawthorn and it will thicken up from the base.
Yes.
Whereas you can't really do much with a willow hedge or an ash hedge.
No,
It depends what you're planting for, isn't it?
do
If
take
you want
that.
them to be stock-proof,
Yes.
which is predominantly the motivation, then a lot of those willows and hazels and ash are not brilliant trees to go in.
No, lots of good points there. If you're planting for a firewood crop, then the willow and the sycamore, and no point in planting ash now, but they're good things to plant because you want them to grow rapidly and accumulate biomass. But there are a lot of other species you can plant, like hazel for one I didn't mention, holly, blackthorn. There's a whole range of things that actually do produce nice thick bushy hedges that can be laid quite well and effectively.
I don't know whether it's the case here, but I've just been reading some stuff about conservation, trees and conservation, and traditionally the hedges were a stretch of managed low level, but then you get standard trees within the hedge.
Yes.
Is that also the case down here? Because then you can have your ash and the trees that grow up as your standards, couldn't you?
You could absolutely.
Like that deliberately, so you get your long straight poles for ash. That's why they put the ash in the hedges, and that years and years and years gone by.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ash were to grow straight, and they could just crop this down, leaving the rest of it to be a stock.
It's
not
fence, ash is
Yeah.
Stop turning fence, stop them going into the next field.
I mean, ash was, you're right, it was often welcomed in hedges because it is the king of all firewoods. brilliant and rapidly growing nice clean stems, but hedge layers don't like it because it's not good, particularly for forming a stock-proof fence for sheep. But nowadays, I started off by saying, right, I don't know if I did, I meant to start off by saying that we don't often manage hedges now as stock-proof boundaries. I don't want to challenge me on that, but we don't, because they all have fences on now. Everything has a wire fence.
Only half of ours do.
Sorry?
Only half of ours do.
Only
Half of our hedges have fences.
yes,
Most of them are. We try and have stock-proof.
and that's
first of all.
brilliant. And that's brilliant. But most commercial farmers now, if they have stock getting through a hedge, will just go, we'll put up a wire fence. And so our hedges have really got different functions these days.
But we did
most
hear this
farmers-
morning about the importance of hedges for shelter for stock,
Yes.
and that's a big thing in somewhere like Exmoor or
Yes.
anywhere in the uplands. If you're probably planting for a number of reasons.
Yes.
It's not just a single purpose, and if you've got a good, solid, well-maintained hedge, then it does fulfil that. But most of those hedges are going to be, keep them compact and dense. It's going to be a lot of flailing, and then potentially every 5 or 10 years let it go up and lay it and then start again.
Yes.
But you're right. Wire is probably what's done for these hedges. It's cheaper, quicker to wang up a bit of stock fence, and then you don't do anything else, and then they get grazed out and you lose them.
But it's not sort of mutually exclusive, is it? Because I think I think what we're trying to do is we've got all this stuck in the middle of, and it's in this kind of condition. Stuck in. You keep finding it and tripping over it. Of course, with barbed wire on as well. So you also lacerate yourself as you're sort of trying to do things in hedges, and it doesn't look very, very attractive. And then it seems to me that you can still have, if you need it, to stock-proof it, putting a fence here, where you're also protecting the stone as well. Because if you've got the kind of species that really like to browse off this or climb up it, I've got all these primitive breeds that, of course, they see this as just steps. So of course they're eroding it, and then stones start falling out, and they're doing more damage to it. So it seems to me that you take it off the top here, put a fence here, and then you can really focus then on getting the hedge in really good condition without worrying about various entities trying to destroy it.
It's tricky because
you'd
this
have to
comb.
probably double fence to get a hedge to establish itself anyway.
Yeah.
If you've got grazing both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
It's tricky because this comb fencing can be quite good when you have species in the bank which benefit from the bank being grazed off each year as well, because otherwise you just end up with rank vegetation. So it's a tough balance. I've got plenty of farmers who would prefer to use comb fencing than having a full-blown fence.
Yes. I think it's all very much always with hedges. You have to think, what are your objectives? You're planting a new hedge. That's particularly true. What are your objectives? And that will influence to a considerable degree the structure of your hedge, how wide it is, what species you plant in it, and what sort of bank you have.
We certainly need to be more sophisticated, because the agri-environment schemes, when entry-level stewardship came in, everyone put all their hedges in because it was easy points. All you got to do is cut it every other year, but they used badly maintained flails. They were woody hedges that were never any good for alternate year cutting, and got disease and weakened out the hedges. Whereas now, unfortunately, the scheme requires rotational cutting in certain situations. But actually thinking about the species that are in there and the regime that you apply to it makes a big difference. There's no point in cutting every other year if you don't have any fruiting species in there. You're better off applying a different regime. And just quickly, because I'm conscious of time, before we finish, what are your thoughts about encouraging and trying out the use of finger bar mowers and rotating disc hedge cutters instead of flails? Because we always talk about flailing hedges, but I've seen contractors now. We've done some work with a contractor who uses a finger bar mower, which is twice the length of a flail. So although they go at half the speed, they can still cover the same ground. And use a mulching flail on the front of the tractor to mulch in that material to stop it getting into animals' hooves and accumulating on the bottom, or you could even gather it up. I don't know
Well,
Do you have any comments
I
on that?
haven't seen that mulching thing, because that was just what I was going to say. The finger bars and the rotary saw discs, you know, then you have a hell of a job clearing up all the stuff that's cut down.
But they can
The
be better for the plants than the hedge, can they?
I don't know. I don't know. It seems to me that most of our trees and shrubs can actually withstand the tearing effect of the flail mower very well. And I don't think myself that there's any truth to the matter that they are much more open to fungal diseases and die that way. Some people have said it's all to do with the smooth-tusked elephant, that in fact our shrubs and trees are adapted to that tearing, twisting action that elephants have. And we had these elephants in the last interglacial period that they actually used when they were browsing on them, and they can withstand it. So, to myself, I've seen hedges, and I do on our farm as well, you know, which have been full of willow, which are big material, which are flailed, and it looks the most appalling mess. But come June, July next year, no problem. And then when you come to lay those hedges or look at them some years later, there hasn't been, there are a few have died off for sure, but that's a natural process, isn't it? But by and large, the flailing doesn't seem to have harmed them. And it's better that you should have flailed them infrequently and heavily than that you should trim them lightly back to the same level year after year after year. Because as you say, Adam, you won't get any or very few flowers and berries if you do that. How are we doing for time?